Welcome, everyone, and happy Friday to you, the first Friday of September of 2025. We are delighted to have you here with us today. As always, we're just giving it a moment or two for our virtual community to get settled into this virtual learning space. And I am delighted that you're here with us this week. We never take it lightly when our community shows up. It lets us know that you value the content that we put out, the guest co-hosts that we bring forth. And we are just so appreciative to be in community with each of you and have you a part of Intentional Conversations podcast. I am Dr. Nika White. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the founder and lead principal consultant for NWC. I must shout out the NWC team as I do every single week because they work tirelessly week after week after week to bring this virtual learning production to the broader community so that we can learn with and from each other. And I am so incredibly grateful. So shout out to the NWC team. And yes, if you're looking at the screen, you see that we are 5 years old. We turned 5 actually this year in April. And it is no small feat to actually have a podcast that goes that length of time. And so we are very grateful that our community has shown up for us, and we appreciate all of the support. If you are new, I want you to know that if you're part of the Zoom community, we love to have smiling faces. But if you are just in a listening capacity, maybe you're multitasking, it's totally fine. Your cameras do not have to be on. That's never, ever, ever mandated, but always optional. I also want to shout out the LinkedIn Live folks that are joining us today. Not only do we have folks that will register in advance and be a part of our Zoom community, but we also have many individuals that catch the episodes week after week by joining us LinkedIn Live. So yes, shout out to all of those who are on LinkedIn Live at this time joining us. If you would go to the chat, let us know where you are joining the conversation from. Yeah, and if you are on LinkedIn Live, I ask you to please go to the comment section and let us know where you are joining the conversation from. It's always a treat for us to see the many different geographies that are represented. And so today is going to be no different as we see where all of you are coming from. I also want you to know that at NWC, we truly value disability inclusion. And as such, we have enabled the closed caption feature for all of those who will find that as a way to enhance your experience today. And so sit back, relax, enjoy the show. I cannot wait for you to engage with today's guest co-host. And as always, we are so glad you're here. Let the conversations begin indeed, and that is precisely what we're about to do. If you're new to the Intentional Conversations podcast, you know that one of the things we do every week at the top of the hour is we like to acknowledge national observances. We think this is critically important. It helps us to build up our cultural intelligence, cultural humility, just to understand the opportunities where we can stand in solidarity with those who may be different from us, but are wonderful contributors to our society. And so September the 15th begins National Hispanic Heritage Month. And so let's do all that we can to build up our knowledge base of those that represent that community and let them know how much we appreciate them and that they are valued, they're seen, that they're heard, all the things, because that is important. I also want you to know that the month of September is National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. This is really critical. One of the things that I often talk about is the importance of mental strength, right? Our mental health and breaking the stigma. And so when I think about Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, I think that it has a lot to do with how are we taking care of our mental health. And so let's continue to think about all of those in society that may be battling and we don't even know it. Let's find ways to build those relationships, cultivate those relationships, be of support and help, and break the stigma so that more people are willing to talk about what they are experiencing. This is critical and it benefits all of us. Now, we have had a tremendous launch of the Boundless program. You've heard us talking about this for week after week after week, and we are so excited that we have officially launched. This is our Women of Color Community of Practice, where we center well-being, empowerment, and leadership. This is an evergreen program, so we continue to enroll new members to the Boundless program all throughout the year. So if you've missed the original kind of campaign where we did the initial kickoff, not to worry, there's still opportunity. So scan that QR code. We'll also place the link directly to the membership page where you can learn more and sign up if you're of interest. But you also can share it out with those that are in your network. And so let's keep spreading the word about this really important program that is standing in solidarity for women of color as we are navigating a lot these days in society. Now, this is a bittersweet moment, but as my team and I were thinking about how we wanted to best relay this information, we said first and foremost, we wanted to do it personally with our community. And so we are taking the month of September to share a bit of news. I just shared that we turned 5 this year. And again, that is no small feat. I want to honor our journey together with you all. And I also want to make way for what's to come. So you're probably thinking, well, what does this mean, Dr. White? So for the past 5 years, Intentional Conversations has been a place where wisdom, perspective, and actionable advice have been shared. We've had over 240 guest co-hosts and countless moments of growth. This community has certainly shaped important dialogue and inspired lasting change, which was the reason it was established back in 2025. As we look ahead, we've made the intentional decision to sunset Intentional Conversations at the end of this month, September. But what I want you to know is that this marks the close of an incredible chapter, one that's been certainly filled with learning, connection, and impact. I tell this community every week that I show up looking to learn. And yes, I do. And I'm so grateful for all of that learning. But endings also make room for beginnings. So what does this mean? While Intentional Conversations, as you know it, is coming to a close, we are so excited to be able to create space for new ways to bring you the conversations, the insights, and inspiration that you have come to appreciate and love, just in a fresh and innovative format. And so stay tuned for more regarding what that looks like. But we still have every single Friday where we'll be here during this window of time for Intentional Conversations, as we have been for the past 5 years. We are grateful to every listener, to every supporter. Not only is this a podcast where we have a live audience that shows up and people will catch the replays because they like to see the interactions that's taking place, but then we also extract the audio every single week and we make the show available in podcast capacity. So there's so many ways for people to get this content. And we are so grateful for every supporter. So this is not a goodbye, by no means at all. It is make way for what's next. And we hope that you will engage in a high level of excitement as you anticipate for what is to come as we plan to share that information out. But stay tuned. Something definitely is on the horizon, and we wanted our community to hear it first from us before we start communicating it out in other channels. And so thank you for being a part of Intentional Conversations. Now, is that a place and time while we're processing maybe that information for me to also let you know what you have to look forward to the remaining portions of this month, while Intentional Conversations is still going to be brought to you every Friday during this hour throughout the month of September. I am so excited to welcome Shayla Atkins on September 12th. She's going to be our guest co-host. And in that conversation, we're going to be talking about leveraging authenticity and inclusion assist in career advancement. And so I am really excited to have her come to share with our community. I hope that you will be here with us on the 12th for that intentional conversation. And then we are very, very, very grateful to be able to welcome back Jen Tardy. And I say welcome back because she is one of the early co-hosts that we've had on our show when we first established the Intentional Conversations podcast. And she has a new book out, and it's called The Equity Edge. And I cannot wait for her to share more about what was the inspiration for the book, what people can expect by reading the book, and some of the other amazing things that she's doing within her practice. And so join us on the 19th for my friend Jen Tardy. And rounding out the month of September, we have Dr. Julia Stam, who's going to be joining us as our guest co-host. And you all know that I do a lot of work around ethical and responsible use for AI. I am a crusader for AI is powerful, but it has to be also used responsibly and ethically. Well, Dr. Julia and I share this. So she's also going to be discussing ethical AI and some of the things that she's doing to help ensure that that message is getting reached to all of the important leaders and individuals that care about, again, just the human experience behind the technology that we're finding ourselves using day in and day out. So I hope you'll be here on September the 26th. And as always, if you can't make it, you can find many, many years of several different past and present episodes of Intentional Conversations, not only on podcasts, but also on our YouTube channel with all the replays that will remain and as well as some of the new coming information that we're going to be sharing out there. Now, it does me great pleasure to take an opportunity to formally introduce today's guest co-host. And for those of you who are new, you may not be aware that I always like to do this by reading the person's bio. I do that because I want the credentials, the accolades, the experiences, the intersecting identities, all of the things that qualifies our guest co-host to show up and be in community with us and to share with you, for that to be very, very clear and transparent. And so I don't know of another way to do that than by sharing their bio. So at this time, I'm going to read our guest co-host bio, Charlotte Otter. Charlotte Otter is an author, a speaker, podcast host, and advisor. Having worked in large companies, including leading global communications teams, she now advises a wide range of clients on reputation, change communications, and building effective communications teams. With global experience in companies such as SAP and Anglo American, and clients ranging from BASF and Siemens to smaller startups, Charlotte is acutely sensitive to the needs of global audience and crafting stories and messages that lands. In a world of wall-to-wall digital noise, it is stories and our humanity that break through. And I'll just say a quick word as I stop sharing my screen and before I bring Charlotte on to greet this audience in her own way, that one of the things that I find great value in is the benefit of storytelling. And so when I was reading up on Charlotte and her story and all that she brings to this conversation, I realized that we have that common. And so I'm so excited to be able to have you here today, Charlotte. Thank you for being here. We do not take it lightly when people say yes to our invitation. And I know that you're joining us from Germany, and so it's in the evening time for you. And so we look forward to certainly making sure that our time is well spent so that you can get back to your evening. But we have a tradition here, Charlotte. Before I release you to greet this audience in your own way, one of the things that we always ask our guest co-host to do is to kindly share something with us that we would not know from hearing your bio, which I've just read, or from looking at your LinkedIn profile. So welcome, and share with us whatever you would love for us to know about you, Charlotte.
Thank you so much for the invitation to join you today, Dr. Nika. Something that people probably wouldn't be able to find out about me is that my first ever job out of university was as a crime reporter on a daily newspaper in my home country of South Africa. And that was in my 20s. And then in my 30s, once I'd left journalism, I went on to write not one, but two novels with a crime reporter as the main character.
Oh, I love that. So a little hidden fact about me. This is just one of my pastimes, is that I am so fascinated by crime stories. I mean, I can sit and watch things like 48 Hours, Snapped, Dateline, all of those shows back to back to back. I am so intrigued by just the forensics aspect, and quite honestly, I mean, it may sound a little odd to some people, but that is like one of my best pastimes. And so, and I don't watch much TV, but if I am going to watch TV, usually my husband knows, let's find a Dateline or something like that. And so I'm intrigued by that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I'm curious, was it specific for you to connect with crime stories? Did you have some kind of affinity and interest in that, or did that particular genre kind of fall into your pathway and you said, okay, yes, let's go with it?
Well, in terms of the job in South Africa 30 years ago, in order to earn your stripes as a journalist, you had to spend up to 5 years in crime reporting, because that was the place where you really learned how to be very specific about facts, how to chase up interviewees. You had to learn to knock on doors. It was really kind of baptism by fire. And then when it came to writing the books, it just seemed like a really natural fit for me. I had a story inside me about my homeland that I wanted to tell, and crime just seemed like a really useful way in.
Love that. I love that. I love that so very much. And I'm sure all of those investigative skills served you well as you continue to further your writing career. So you have a strong and rich communications background. And as I mentioned before, we share that. My background is Marcoms. And so when you have spent time leading global teams to now advising a diverse set of clients, what intentional choices or turning points shape your career? You told us about obviously writing the climb stories, but what were some of those other really impressionable moments that helped you to get to where you are today?
I love that you used impressionable and intentional because I think that my career choices were much more impressionable than intentional. So, my husband was working for a German tech company in Johannesburg, South Africa. We were newlyweds, and he was offered the opportunity to move to Germany to work at the head office for 2 years. And that was 30 years later. So we moved to Germany kind of by mistake without really intending to. My first job at SAP, which is the tech company, was as a technical writer. Then I had a 10-year career break to raise our three children because no family nearby. I wrote the novels, became a blogger, and I was brought back into SAP in 2012 for my blogging skills. So just like comms and marcoms teams today hire in Gen Z with TikTok skills, I was brought in as somebody who understood how to get executives onto social media. So I never intended to become an executive communicator, but that was the role that SAP matched me to. And by the time I left SAP in 2022, I was running the function globally. So I was head of executive comms, and I'd also had employee communications folded under me. So I went from being an individual contributor to running a very large global team in just over 6 years.
Oh, fantastic. No, that's amazing. And so as you're talking about all the many different careers that you've had that fits under this main, Marcom type of umbrella, as I was reading your bio, I referenced the noisy digital world that we find ourselves in right now. And it seems like it's growing in intensity in that regard. But the stories really does center humanity. And I went on to share that that's a common point that you and I have is I truly believe in the power and the value of storytelling to help create those connections, to humanize different situations and become much more relatable. I think that it is an incredible way to break through the divide of difference that sometimes can cause us to not engage as deeply that would serve us best. And so from your voice and your point of view, can you share with us what makes stories so powerful enough to cut through this intense noise that we're experiencing right now in this digital world?
It's such a great question, Dr. Nika. And somebody recently said that stories are our oldest technology. And stories really take us back to the campfire, to the tribe. It was what told us we belonged, storytelling. Without
Mm.
storytelling, we wouldn't have known that we belonged to something, a community greater than ourselves. So I think that in this day and age where there's so much, as you say, so much digital noise, it's the storytelling that reminds us how human we are. They remind us to have empathy for other people's experiences. And they remind us that emotions are important. And I think you mentioned AI, in this world where, AI is already telling our stories, writing our books, creating our music and our art. So important to privilege that human connection and human emotions.
Absolutely. I think it's what is missing from so many different spaces and places that has caused us to be at this place and time where so many people are experiencing burnout. They're experiencing feeling disconnected. And when you think about the complexity of all the things that we're having to navigate, just from a day-to-day perspective, we need more relatability, especially when I think about the workplaces where people are needing to collaborate for greater productivity and performance outcomes. But then beyond that, just so that we can remain at a place of mental strength, right? And I think that through those connection points, that empathy, that compassion that you spoke of, it certainly helps to amplify that I'm not just seated next to a peer and a colleague, but this is a person that is more than just their output and their performance, right? And so I'm a big fan of storytelling. In fact, at NWC, we're so intentional with one of our service offerings where we help organizations to embed a storytelling culture. And we help them to think about all the different areas of operations. How can you very intentionally upskill your leaders, and then even trickle that down to those who are in other areas of the organization from a hierarchy perspective to really lean into storytelling. I find, Charlotte, and I want to get your thoughts on this, but I find that when leaders, people that are in positions of power, whether it's a leader by title or positionality, when they give themselves permission to be vulnerable and to share stories, that's when it opens up this incredible world where others also feel like, well, I can do this too, then, right? And sometimes we feel like we can't bring our whole selves to a professional environment. And sometimes when we tell stories about ourselves and it makes us vulnerable, we see that as a weakness. And so just share your thoughts on how you are perceiving storytelling and from a responsibility of leaders.
Yeah, it was so lovely that you said the word vulnerability because for me, that's the key to everything. So, stories show our human side and show how vulnerable we are. And if I may, I will tell a story about why I didn't stay in crime reporting,
Okay, please.
um, because it shows something about me. So, it was Christmas time, and in South Africa, Christmas comes in summer because we're the opposite side of the planet from you guys. And my job was to go with a very, very experienced photographer to the cancer ward of the Children's Hospital, where Father Christmas was coming to hand out gifts. And the photojournalist I was working with had covered war zones, incredibly experienced guy, and I was a complete newbie. And I walked into the children's ward and I saw the children with no hair and the joy in their faces as they received the presents from Father Christmas, from Santa Claus. And I burst into such hysterical tears and behaved to my shame in such a non-professional way that a nurse, a sister, had to take me aside and give me sweet tea in order to recover. And the photojournalist, who I was desperate to impress, had to do my job for me. And it was that it was one of the moments where I realized maybe I'm not cut out for this. If every time I'm in a situation where people are hurt, people are wounded, I'm going to be in tears, maybe I don't have the professional polish that it takes to be a journalist. I'm not saying I'm not proud of my emotional response to the situation I was in, but I realized that it was going to be a challenge for me. But back to your question. Um, I love it when a leader cracks open and shows that bit of vulnerability. I think that leaders often feel a sense of needing to be perfect. They need to show this perfect outside, this perfect shell. They need to have all the answers. They need to be seen as the most powerful person in the room. But that's very hard for others to connect with. So it's when they crack and they show that little bit of vulnerability that they're so much more likely to create the fans and the followers that they need in order to create the change and the transformation that they wish to create in their organizations.
Yes. Charlotte, you first and foremost, thank you so much for your vulnerability and sharing your story with our community. And you mentioned change and transformation. I literally just wrote those two words down before you said them because that's where I wanted to bring us to. I think that one of the greatest value sets of storytelling is the ability for stories to change people, change their perspectives, move them to action. So the transformation that you spoke of, and so I wanted to bring that to the conversation because even as you were sharing so vulnerably, you talked about your emotional response. And one of the things that I crusade for, as I kind of spoken to early on, is our mental health, right? And part of our mental health means being so self-aware to where we can regulate our own emotions. And what that looks like oftentimes, and I'm bringing this full circle to some of the points we've made so far, but what makes that really critical is that we don't suppress our emotions, but we become one with them, let them pass through so that then we gain the power and the control over those emotions. And so I just wanted to bring that up because there could be some people that just heard your story and maybe they thought, you know what, I've been in that position as well and it didn't feel too good. It may not feel good, but it is best for us to let ourselves notice those emotions and then neutralize them. I feel like emotions for us, Charlotte, are just signals of pause, take inventory. What does this mean, right? And then that can really help us to um, be grounded and centered. So I just wanted to bring that to the conversation. But thank you so much for sharing your story. I want to talk a little bit about the fact that your work causes you to be deeply immersed in reputation and messaging, and how can organizations use more effectively communications to advance diversity, equity, inclusion, and some of these other really significant social impact issues that oftentimes we find ourselves being troubled by, particularly when we consider just a society as it is right now.
Yeah, and I'd love to say, Dr. Nika, at the outset that diversity, equity, and inclusion is one of my powerful personal values. And I believe so strongly in diversity, which is why I've written the book that I wrote, which is called We Need New Leaders. And when you combine DEI with reputation, it's an incredibly powerful tool, both for businesses and companies who wish to advance their brand, but also for individual leaders who may have a diverse identity, may come from a diverse background, or from an underrepresented minority in the workplace. Because what reputation offers is the ability to own and tell your own narrative, to match that narrative to your actions, and then to spread your stories through your networks, whether those are online or in person. And that is what I counsel my clients to do. So I now work one-to-one with leaders, and I counsel them, most importantly of all, and this goes for companies as well as individual leaders, if your words and your behaviors don't match, that is a reputational threat. That is the trust gap. It's a credibility gap. And that's what we're seeing with so many businesses right now in the last year, is businesses who 2 years ago said DEI is one of our values and now have deprioritized or removed DEI almost entirely from their business. Now, to me, that's reputational.
Absolutely. And I think that we're seeing a lot of practitioners in the space of DEI amplifying that sometimes people are not realizing the ripple effect of all of the different implications when people pull back from DEI. It's reputational risk, it's social risk. I mean, it's, your talent workforce risk. It's so many different things that can be impacted. And so I love the fact that you are crusading for the importance of the value of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And you referenced your book, and so I want to go ahead and go there next. We need new leaders. Talk a little bit more about what was really the impetus that got you to the place where you said, now is the time, I'm going to write this, I'm going to release this into the world. And what can people expect by getting your book and engaging with it?
Oh, thank you for that question. So the first step was, after leaving corporate and starting my own business. At the same time, I went back to university after 30 years, and I engaged in a program called an MSc in Change Leadership, which is jointly run by HEC Paris and Oxford University. And the reason I chose Change Leadership is I realized after a career in communication that all communication is about change. So no leaders ever get up on stage and say, folks, I'm here to tell you everything's staying the same. Does not happen. And I had led the communications of some large change initiatives. So I felt I needed, if I was going to offer that as part of my offering as a consultant, I wanted to understand it academically and understand it better. The thesis I wrote for that course was a thesis on reputation, and it was on how the head of comms and the CEO build trust to manage and mitigate reputational risk. And when I came out, I had a chat with both my professors about how I could take the thesis further. One said you could do a PhD, the other said you could write a business book, and I thought, well, a business book would probably be quicker than writing a PhD. So
I don't know.
so in order to make the business book a passion project for me, because there are many good comms books out there, and I really didn't feel I needed to write another one, I asked myself the question as I set out to do the research for the book: what can leaders from diverse identities, diverse backgrounds, and underrepresented minorities learn from the tools of reputation management, so my skill set, to land, keep, or create their dream leadership roles? So it's the intersection of diversity, reputation, and leadership. And I interviewed 40 emerging and established leaders all over the world, all different types of backgrounds. And I really wanted to hear their stories. So my book is a book of other people's stories. I am decentered in the book, and it's about the stories of others from a wide variety of backgrounds, how they think about their leadership role, how they think about their reputation, what diversity means to them. And really, the common theme that came out was that leaders who have some form of diversity in their backgrounds have
Mhm.
gone through obstacles to get to where they are.
Yeah.
Those obstacles teach empathy, and that empathy makes them fantastic leaders. And they lead with intentionality in how they behave, intentionality about their values, intentionality about how they communicate, and they're all incredibly thoughtful about how they lead and how they show up every day.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking us through that. And by the way, we have shared into the chat as well as into the comment section, if you're joining us by LinkedIn Live, a link for you to check out Charlotte's book. And what I'm fascinated by is this blend of reputation management, but then also aligning that with leadership, and then just connecting it to the storytelling factor as a way to be able to get the message out to so many others. And so reputation management is definitely within your wheelhouse. It is one of your superpowers or areas of expertise. And when I think about the age we're in right now, where there's so much scrutiny and criticism of brands and leaders, right? I think that it becomes even more important for the message that you're crusading for. And so, what are some, maybe the top 2 or 3 tips that you naturally gravitate to when you are coaching leaders around being intentional to build and sustain trust? Because I think that the root of reputation, when it becomes compromised, is that trust has been breached.
Yeah, absolutely. Trust is reputation's closest sibling, so it's very, very important. Um, I coach my clients that they really need to know their values, which is why I said to you, Dr. Nika, earlier on what my values are. It's very,
Yeah.
very important for people to speak their values out loud, then tell the stories that match their values, ensure that their behaviors match their values, which creates that gap that we talked about before. But the most powerful message that I have is that doing a great job at work or in the workplace, particularly as a leader from a diverse background or with a diverse identity, doing the job is not enough. It's only 50%. The other 50% is talking about it. And Marianne Sieghart, who's the author of The Authority Gap, says that the best way to counteract bias is a stellar record of success. And I focus very much on that record with my clients. So, what are you talking about? What are the stories that you're telling? How are you showing up? Talk through your mistakes, your fumbles, the things that went wrong. These are powerful, and they're very important messages for the generations who are following us to see that we don't have to be that perfect constructed leader, that we can be leaders with imperfections and with vulnerabilities. And why the reputation management is so powerful is that it's not just about representation. By living your reputation out loud as a leader, you're creating a bridge for the next generation to cross. And that's what I love. That's why I say it's a power tool, that you're actually showing, that little girl in STEM, how she too can become a CTO of a startup because you're talking through your stories and your process and how you got there.
That's so good. One of our community members has just amplified in the chat. Toki, thank you for being here. Trust is like a mirror. Once it's broken, you can't ever look at it the same way again. And that's so true. I love this connection point between the trust factor and, again, reputation management. You said something that is staying with me. And so I don't want to move too fast without going back to it. You were referencing the author of Authority Gap. And give us the author's name again, please.
Her name is Marianne Sieghart.
Marianne Sieghart. And I'm not sure if I'm getting the language correct, but you said stellar record of success is what can counteract bias. And what's coming up for me, Charlotte, is that the seat that I sit in, the work that I do, I spend a lot of time helping people to realize that bias is not something that is just malicious intent. It could be that we're just conditioned based upon different records that we have stored, relative about stereotypes and generalizations about people. But one thing that has become very evident to me and so many other women of color, specifically Black women, is that no matter how stellar your qualifications are and your record may be, there is still going to be systems that are steeply rooted in bias that may work against us. And so I bring this to the conversation because I love the fact that you have spoken about the importance of having a stellar record of success. Does not mean that you've been perfect all the time and you've done everything, with a lens that can never be criticized. It is that you're learning from it and that you're vulnerable enough, and in that strength and power of sharing that, it gives you the freedom. And I think that people earn a lot of additional, credence and credibility when they are willing to do that. So I just want to pause for a second and give you a moment to respond to that if you like. But the connection point really stood out to me, so I wanted to bring that to the conversation.
Yeah, and I thank you, Dr. Nika, for talking about systemic inequity because, I say very early on in the book, I 100% acknowledge that exists, and that it is not the responsibility of each individual to break down the system. But unfortunately, until we have DEI that's genuinely working for us, the systems will continue to exist. But telling your story vulnerably and powerfully is a way to start to dilute the power of that system. It's the way to start watering it down. And then I'd like to say something to the vulnerability versus the imperfection. This was something I learned during my MSc. Leaders who are single loop learners are leaders who see a problem, throw the resources at the problem, and fix the problem. Leaders who are double loop learners see the problem and make sure they fix it as quickly as possible. But they also ask, and this is where the double comes in, what was it in my behavior that caused this problem, and what can I do in future to make sure that it doesn't happen again? And that's where vulnerability sits, because the single loop leader never wants the feedback. They never want to hear what they did to cause the problem. But the double loop leader, the double loop learning leader, is prepared to be vulnerable enough to ask for feedback from their teams to ensure that the problem is not repeated. And that, for me, I think was the genesis of the book, even though I didn't realize at that time, because I realized, oh, I haven't met very many of those double loop learning leaders. I've mostly met single loop learners. And I want to go and find out from the double loop learners how they lead.
Yeah, I love this, and I'm big on language. And so I can see when you are exposing teams to this, this type of language, that, it becomes something that everyone coalesces around. So for example, have we double looped this so that we fixed it, right? Have
Yeah,
we really,
yeah.
taken this full circle? And I appreciate that, Charlotte, because it speaks to the significance of sustaining what we're fixing so that we aren't finding ourselves back at that same place again. If we don't know what went wrong and what we're going to do different to be able to action behind that, we're going to find ourselves in this vicious cycle going back to that same point. And so I'm loving the single loop leader versus double loop leader mentality. And I think we all can learn a lot from that. So I want to let you know that we're getting close to the point in time where we're going to be opening it up for our audience, our community, to ask questions and engage with our conversation today. If you're on Zoom, you can certainly do so by using the raise hand feature that lets me know that you're willing to be invited to unmute yourself and share it. If your camera's on, I'll even add you to the spotlight. Otherwise, feel free to go to the chat. We're watching that closely, and you can share your comments and questions there. If you're on LinkedIn Live, and that's how you're joining the conversation today, not to worry. Place your questions and comments into the comment section, and my team is watching that and bringing it over so that we all can be connected in one communication space. And so while you're percolating on that, thinking about what curiosities are bubbling up, I'm going to go to the next question just to give you a chance to really formulate how you may want to engage. And this is, related to the organizational change management process that you spend a lot of time guiding clients through. I find that change is often met with a lot of uncertainty and resistance. And the resistance is because of the uncertainty due to the change. One of the conversations that I'm having a lot these days, Charlotte, is how do we future proof our leaders? There's so much going on. I don't think that our leaders know how to really navigate the complexity of change. And that is troublesome because it certainly is impacting productivity and relationships, etc. And so I've been spending a lot of time thinking about that. What I'd love for you to impart some knowledge around is what are some communication practices that you have found to help teams feel seen, valued, and heard and aligned during times of significant transition and change?
So I like to advise my clients, and I also tried to do this when I was back in corporate. If you're leading change, to spend a lot less time talking and a lot more time listening.
Yeah,
I do think that people who feel as if change is being acted on them need to be heard and they need to be listened to. And then the next step after doing a thorough listening tour is for leaders to demonstrate what actions they're taking based on the listening. So
yeah,
listening alone is not enough. It needs to be combined with clear actions, and then the communications team comes on board to communicate the listening and then the actions. In terms of future-proofing leaders, I think it's such a great question, Dr. Nika, because if you think about middle management right now,
yeah.
they probably had very little leadership training. I certainly didn't. I did 6 months of being a leader before I even went on a single course because I just didn't have time.
Yeah, we hear
There
that a lot.
ha
People get promoted to a manager role where they're responsible now for people under their purview because they do their job well, but that does not mean that they've been positioned to know how to manage and lead effectively. So I'm with you on
yeah,
that. Carry
yeah.
on.
So they're learning on the job. They're having to inspire their teams and make sure that their teams are actually delivering. And now, in the age of AI, a lot of those middle managers are being asked to completely reinvent their function
Yes.
at the same time. So it's this exponential amount of pressure. And in my podcast, I've been talking to leaders about this. And what's been coming up is this idea that the hierarchy breaks when you have that exponential amount of pressure. Very senior leaders may try to coach, but they're going to find that very new members of their teams know a lot more about AI than they do. So really what to future-proof themselves, what leaders need to produce is a culture of high autonomy
Yeah.
and high freedom. And you know, those single loop learning leaders don't like giving their teams high autonomy and high freedom. But it is the only way that managers will be able to cope with those exponential pressures that they have on them.
Yeah, very, very well stated, Charlotte. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I also appreciate the recognition of, when we are in times of significant change and uncertainty, the amplification of listening more than we do talking, right? Really hearing the stories, hearing the pain points from the perspective of those who are going to be impacted by all the change, right? And then the importance of that feedback loop. One of the things I hear so often, because my firm, we do a lot of assessment work to just uncover what are some areas of opportunity to either reinforce things that are going well or to fix things that we know are compromising the health of the culture and the workplace environment. And what I often hear from individuals within the organization around their trepidations for even engaging in those surveys or focus groups is that nothing's going to change. We've done this
Mm.
before, and we never even hear what the outcomes are. We never even see evidence that something is now shifting as a result of it. So why spend my energy and time, socializing around all the things and giving all this feedback? And so I appreciate the amplification of how important it is for that feedback loop to take shape, because it goes back to the trust factor. People want to be able to trust that if you're doing this for the outcomes of trying to make some improvements, it doesn't mean that we're going to hold you to improving everything immediately, right? But that you're hearing us, and having that feedback loop is a way to be able to do that. Okay, so I'm not seeing any hands raised so far, but that's totally fine. But the request is still out there and the offering is still out there. So keep thinking about maybe what's coming up for you. And certainly I will allow you to be able to share. I'm going to go to my next question. We've already touched a little bit on AI in this digital world and how certainly that is shaping a lot of the ways in which we are communicating. So how do you see the future of strategic storytelling evolving, particularly when you think about this era that we're in relevant to AI technologies?
I think that AI is an incredibly useful tool
Mhm.
in terms of creating first drafts.
Mhm.
What I counsel clients to do is not over rely on it for the final product. So,
Absolutely.
and make sure that you're adding the human touch, the empathy, the emotions, the storytelling. So I think that AI can produce very useful basic structures, but I think it's always going to be incumbent on humans to tell human stories. And I think we're going to see that leaders who understand that and leaders who have got in touch with themselves, understand their values, know what their stories are, know what the great stories are that enhance their brands, those are going to be both the leaders and the brands that survive in an age of very anodyne, somewhat boring, same AI content. So I just think the pressure to be more human and tell more stories in order to succeed and grow your reputation as a leader and as a brand
Yeah.
will continue.
Yeah, I totally agree. It is a powerful tool, but it is a tool to be leveraged with that human touch, right? And so we have to
Mm.
make sure we aren't just relying solely on it, to your point. So I do believe that as well. I want to talk about the fact that you've advised communications teams to be more effective, right? To really become more robust in their approach. What I'm also understanding is that what makes communications teams effective has a lot to do with the culture and the environment and how in which people are receiving the information. I find, Charlotte, that oftentimes some of the breakdown within a system, within the confines of an organization, is not really the system or the issue, it's more of the lack of communication flow. And so, what are some ways in which you like to guide your clients around how to best leverage communications as a way to quality control and avoid a preventative measure of avoiding some of the conflicts and the breakdowns that can occur within an organizational structure?
Yeah, so what I've seen is that one of the problems is the breakdown and not enough communication.
Yeah,
Another problem is too much communication.
yeah, that's true.
Because we're all overwhelmed as humans. There's content being thrown at us all the time. And if our internal business systems are also throwing content at us, it's very hard for individual employees to work out which messages matter. So I think the most powerful tool, and it goes back to middle managers, is to empower managers to become communicators because that cascade from CEO via with the comms team as the intermediary, the message can get lost. And
Yes.
I was actually talking to a very senior communicator at IKEA today, and she was telling me that they are now focusing on training everybody to become better communicators.
Mhm.
And if you become a good communicator, you have to understand what you're communicating. So you have to grapple with whatever the change, the transformation, the problem, the thing that we want to fix. And you need to understand that. And then you're more able to explain it to your peers and your colleagues. So it's almost as if communicators need to become more invisible and become coaches for the rest of the employee body.
That is so good. And what comes to mind for me is that, yes, oftentimes we have these organizational structures where the C suite's really at the top, they're kind of not really accessible and they're delivering the main news. And then that goes down to the next tier of those middle managers. And those middle managers are the ones who are having to deliver the news to the masses for the most part, right? So if they are not equipped with the ability to do that effectively, then that can be a breakdown in and of itself. And I've seen it happen way too many times. And so I love this notion of, people leaders also need to be upskilled around effective communications. And it goes back to what we said before, just because you're good at your job does not necessarily mean that you also have all of the skill sets to be able to lead people, which includes effective communication. And so therein lies a really important question that I want to bring to you. And I feel like I know the answer, but I'm going to ask this question anyway, Charlotte. Do you think that people leaders can be effective if they are not effective communicators? Because we have a lot of people that maybe think, well, I'm an introvert. So I just don't communicate maybe the same way, or I'm not aggressive enough. And so what do you say when people question those things?
So I discovered during COVID that I was an introvert and I'd led a team of 50. And I actually don't think that my introversion got in the way.
Mm,
I think that my introversion actually allowed me to be very successful one-on-one or one-to-few.
yeah,
Definitely was less great at leading large meetings. And although I'm very comfortable on stage, it's not that I have discomfort with that, but I always wanted to make sure that other voices were heard.
yeah,
So I do question the idea that maybe introversion is not a great leadership skill. I think it actually can be. I do
absolutely.
think we have a very old archetype in our heads of what a leader is. And this is something I'm trying to counteract both with my book and with my podcast Speech Bubbles is how do we break that archetype? It's almost primal. It's in the back of our heads.
Yeah,
It's almost our neuroscience. And to us, we recognize it instinctively. We go, oh, that loud person up on the stage is a leader. And another academic I lent on in writing the book is an academic called Tomas Chamorro Premuzic. And he said we privilege confidence over competence.
yeah, that is so good. That is so good. And I was hoping you were going to go there because I, like you, I do not believe that if you're an introvert, you cannot be an effective leader. And I think that our society, whether we realize it or not, often we favor extroversion. And I want to also break that stigma. And so I would love for you to say more about those who may perceive effective communication as the frequency, the loudness, the confidence of it. I think it's much more. It needs to be unpacked much further than just than that. So can you talk a little bit more about what that looks like from your vantage point?
I think the key to breaking the loudness
Mhm.
is authenticity. I think it's about being as real as a leader is comfortable with being. It goes back to what we were saying at the top of the show, being prepared to be vulnerable, being prepared to show that not everything is perfect, being prepared to ask for feedback, being prepared to say, hey, team, I got that wrong. Please help me be consistent next time. I think that knowing who you are as a leader and owning it is the power tool to breaking that archetype that we have of the loud, confident, noisy leader.
Yeah, probably all of us can point to situations and even individuals that may come to mind where they are slow to speak and may show up in different spaces and places and have such a tremendous presence, right? They command a certain presence, very well respected. But when they do decide to socialize their thoughts, everyone listens because they
Mm.
know that they have been very intentional about what they want to deposit and contribute to that space. And so I often think about that when I'm engaged in conversations like this. And so I think it is important for us to realize that leading can look different, and we have to break out of the mode of just seeing one way as a singular way of being able to be a
Yes.
successful leader. I also think is very circumstantial. I think that there's so many situations that may require us to tap a certain portion of our leadership skills more so than maybe something else in a different situation. And so I appreciate that. So we need new leaders. What does the new leader look like? Just sum that up for us.
A new leader is somebody who knows their values, who tells stories, not perfect stories, whose behavior matches their stories and matches their values, and who has strong networks, has strong communities, whether digital or in person, because what happens in the network is other people talking about those leaders. So it's not enough to only talk about yourself. You need those networks and those communities and those people to take your story exponential who can confirm your reputation and who you are.
And while you didn't use this word, Charlotte, I am hearing accountability show up very loud and clear,
Yeah.
especially when you talk about the importance of speaking your values. Well, not just speaking your values, but speaking them to where you're living your values. You know, your actions and your behaviors certainly match those that you're verbalizing. And to me, that's the accountability, you know, and I am finding that that's where we have a lot of room for growth. And this society, as I think about just leaders holistically and just the collection of, you know, the collective leaders that we have, is that we may say something just to appease the moment and how we want people to engage with us. But you know, the actions aren't aligning, and that breaches trust, and then that has all these reputation, you know, issues that are not being managed well because of that, and then it becomes a disaster. And so this has been such great wisdom that you've shared with us today, and I'm so grateful. As we wind down to our final 5 moments, I have two more questions that's coming up, and one of which is beyond just corporate storytelling with your very rich Marcoms background. You're an author, of course, in your own right. Again, Charlotte's book is "We Need New Leaders," and I actually would like my team to place that again into the chat. We've shared it once before, but once again, just as we're winding down, what I would love for you to talk about is how has, Charlotte, your own personal writing informed the way that you like to tell stories yourself?
Well, that's such a lovely question. I think that writing for me is a tool to find out what I think. Um, you know, I live in Heidelberg, Germany. It's a very beautiful city. 5 minutes walk away from gorgeous forests. So I walk in the forest every morning, and that's when a lot of my ideas come. But it takes the writing down of the ideas, the transforming them from the brain to the page, that really help me to work out what I think. And I wrote "We Need New Leaders" in a storm. I wrote it in about 3 months. I mean, I did all the interviews first because I felt so passionate about the topic. So I think that writing helps me work out what I think, and then it's a place of flow. It's a place of flow and joy for me. So some people may get flow from running, other people may get flow from dancing, and I get it from walking in the forest and from writing.
Love that. Love that. That's beautiful. So, at the heart of this podcast, you know, of course, is called intentional conversation. So, intentionality is right at the nuclear. So, what does living and leading with intention mean to you, Charlotte? And how do you practice that in your career and personal life?
I feel like I've said this a lot and I don't want to sound repetitive, but for me it's about living your values out loud. So, you know, when I left corporate, I spent a lot of time with a coach, and my values are freedom, justice, and authenticity. And I just try to live according to those. And that makes me intentional because I don't make choices that don't chime with those values.
Freedom, justice, and authenticity. That is beautiful. Great values to live by. Okay, so I want to give you our final moments before I turn it over to you to close this out in whatever way that feels appropriate. I want to thank this community for showing up today. I want to thank you, Charlotte, for being such a willing vessel to lend your skills, your talents, your experience, your wisdom to this community. I certainly have learned a lot during this window of time. I hope you will get Charlotte's book. Again, it's in the chat. Also, we place it into the comment section if you're joining us LinkedIn Live. And we look forward to seeing you all again next week. But Charlotte, I want you to close this out. I'm sure there's so much more that we could dialogue on, but I want you to be able to close this out in a way that maybe brings to the fore something that you have a lot of energy and passion for that I have not asked you about. How would you like to leave this audience?
So I just want to say to anyone who has ambition to lead, whether in their communities or in a corporate or even as a solopreneur, think about your reputation as vitamins, not aspirin. Your reputation protects your immune system, and it is a power tool to help you succeed as a leader, whether it's in corporate, in community, or as a solopreneur.
So well spoken. Thank you all again. Have a safe and wonderful weekend. And we look forward to seeing you again next week for another episode of Intentional Conversations. Be well, everyone. Bye bye.